to listen to the Garnaut climate review, partly because I'm a really concerned citizen of Australia who would like to see more action on climate change, and I want to see what this report has come up with and what the recommendations are. I think clean coal is a bit of a farce, so I'm interested to see what they've come up with, but I know a lot of good reports from the Commission, so I'm interested to see what's going on here. And I also work for community radio, so I wanted to do a report back.
Professor Garnaut is a Professor of Economics at the Australian National University and the Vice-Chancellor's Fellow at the University of Melbourne. He is currently Chairman of a number of international organisations and research organisations and companies, including the International Food Policy Research Institute. From 1985 to 1988, he was also the Ambassador for Australia to China.
The need for action is urgent. If we're going to significantly reduce the climate change risks, we have to move very quickly. Also dealing with a diabolical international problem. There'll be no solution to the problem of global warming unless there's effective cooperation of a dimension and complexity that is unprecedented. So there's no doubting the difficulty of this task, and we won't get there, we won't succeed unless we do rather better than humanity usually does. Science points to a very considerable warming of the Australian continent under business as usual, but also, in the most likely case, a significant drying of southern Australia, and for a wet and dry continent that will be very damaging. That's the first of three reasons why we'll be hurt more by dangerous climate change than will any other developed country. The second reason why we're particularly at risk is that we, more than any other developed country, live in a region of developing countries, including in our near neighbourhood, fragile developing countries. It's recognised clearly that developing countries are much more vulnerable to climate change than developed countries. They don't have the political institutions, the flexible markets and economies, and the wealth and incomes that can be applied to adaptation. They're much more likely to fracture with the impacts of climate change, and their problems would be our problems. The third reason why Australia has an especially strong interest in effective global mitigation is that the structure of our economy makes us more vulnerable to any setback to growth in the developing world than does the structure of any other developed economy. In our modelling, in our early modelling, the results of which are presented in the draft report, we show very clearly that the way that climate change is likely to affect growth in other countries would have a much more damaging effect on Australia through the terms of trade than it would on any other developed country. There's no chance whatsoever of getting developing countries on board unless we do what we said we agreed, what the Australian government agreed at Kyoto in 1997. Once the developed world has taken those steps, the task is then an urgent one to bring in the major developing countries. The transition will involve many opportunities, and Victoria is particularly well placed to do well out of those opportunities.
What are the infrastructure and social costs of a 1 metre sea level rise here in Australia, which seems to be a likely scenario?
I think the costs would be extremely high. We'd feel the costs in two ways. Lower-lying urban settlements would be directly damaged, and of course they would be subject to much more damage from surges in storms and so on. The Australian insurance industry is very much focused on these problems. The costs are extremely high, but I think we would find the biggest cost for us would be the destabilisation of life in the mega cities of Asia based on the great river deltas. Many of the great cities of Asia are based on deltas very close to sea level. In our own Southeast Asian neighbourhood, Bangkok, Jakarta, in China, Ningbo, which takes all of our iron ore, Shanghai, Guangzhou, in India, Mumbai, Calcutta, most of Bangladesh. The most compelling argument for greater urgency is the one that's resulted from our own research, that business as usual emissions are growing far faster than the standard IPCC science and the Stern report were based upon. But thanks for your interest. We look forward to that continued interest through to the completion of our work with the final report at the end of September. Thanks for joining us.